I.
Camera speed.
Down production. Take
If we
one.
can, this is the opening cut.
We all have our stories of change and challenges, and it is my hope that these episodes will provide encouragement. Remember to follow, listen, and share with those you know. In studio today, we have an old friend of mine, Willy Bowles, and I want to say welcome, Willy. You look good here. What's up?
Thank you, Barry. It's been a long time. I'm so glad we're reconnecting. Missed you greatly, my friend, and it's so good to see your face.
Yeah, I can't wait for you to share your stories with my listeners. And it's so interesting. Willy wrote a book recently. It's entitled Pop, and it's all about fathering. The memories I have of Willy, just to start it off, is he had great parents, a great mom and a great dad. And so I have not read the book yet, but it's coming. And so I wanted a conversation with you, Willy, just to maybe start with growing up years so the listeners have a chance to get to know you a little bit, and then we'll move into talking about fatherhood. All right? So,
Great.
big question here. Where does your story start?
Well, I mean, really, when it comes to fathering, you mentioned it. I grew up with great parents. I mean, my parents were fantastic. Grew up in a Christian home. They loved the Lord. They loved my sister and I. There wasn't anything they wouldn't do for us. Um, and my dad was the greatest influence in my life, bar none. In fact, it's funny. When I was a kid, I didn't have idols. I didn't have TV stars or athletes that I mean, you have athletes you like, but I didn't have any that I would call my hero or somebody I looked up to, because my heroes were always my mom and dad.
Mm.
And my dad was he was the best man in the wedding to my first wife. And
Wow.
you were there.
Yeah,
Did you perform the ceremony?
in
That's right.
San Antonio, right?
Yes, in San
Yeah.
Antonio. And so my dad,
Outside in the courtyard.
that's right, around the little waterfall there. So
Yeah.
my dad was my best man in the wedding. I wouldn't have had it any other way.
Wow.
And it was, I grew up in a great home. My dad worked a lot. My dad was a nuclear operator for PG&E, and so he had a lot of stress and worked a lot. But I don't ever remember my dad missing a sports event that I was at or anything. I mean, he was at everything, and
Man.
it was phenomenal to grow up like that and to see that. And so for me, fathering was just a natural extension of what I had experienced. And the funny thing
Yeah.
is that my family on my dad's side is very dysfunctional. In
Hmm.
fact, we would never go to a family reunion because my dad didn't want us around that. And my uncles and aunt all have dealt with alcoholism, and their kids have had trouble. I mean, they're all doing well now, and they've all done the really hard work to pull it together. But the story goes, when I was probably two, my dad came home one night, actually was brought home and thrown on our front lawn. He was basically butt naked, and he was drunk out of his mind. And my mom went outside. My grandfather on my mom's side, my mom's dad was a pastor. And so talk about two worlds colliding. One hand is my mom growing up in a home of a minister, very sheltered, and then my dad, not at all. And so it was two worlds colliding. And my dad was brought home, put on the lawn. My mom and him got in this huge fight. Somehow I crawled out of my crib, went outside because I
Oh
heard the
my.
commotion. And the story goes that my dad looked at me coming out the front door and said, this thought went through his mind, my kids will not grow up the way I grew up. And
Wow.
that moment on, I never saw an ounce of alcohol in the house until after I graduated college. It really is a story of my father who broke the chain of dysfunction.
Yeah.
So my sister and I, my kids, they never experienced that because they didn't have to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's an amazing story. And that's the story that I try to let people know. Maybe you have come from a really bad place. Maybe your family history is horrible, but somebody's got to break that chain. Somebody's got to break that and stop that, and that could be you. And I talk to people all the time who are doing that and making that, and it's like, do you realize what you've just done for all the generations that follow you? I mean, my first wife, I keep, just to clear everything up, my first wife passed away after 17 years of marriage. Maybe we get into that later. But my first wife and I, we did the foster care. We did stuff like that because we wanted to give kids an opportunity to break the chain in their life,
Yeah.
to have a fresh start and to be able to grow up in an environment where they could actually set themselves free. And so, for me, that's where the story begins. Is just really, it's like the luck of the lottery. I won the lottery. I was born at the right parents with parents that made right decisions, and gave us examples that I always wanted to follow.
Well, I met you, I think, when you came back from playing football at, was it Arizona?
New Mexico.
New Mexico. As we moved to the Central Coast, March of 89.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
met you what, that summer?
Yep. Yep. It
Yeah.
was that summer.
So you were already out of high school, but the years I don't know about, what kind of kid were you?
So when I was in elementary school, I was actually bullied. I was a short, little fat kid. I was bullied quite a bit. And then between the summer between my eighth grade year and ninth grade year, I grew like 3 or 4 inches. And it was just phenomenal. I went back as a freshman, and all the people that bullied me all of a sudden were afraid of me because I was much bigger, and the bullying stopped. And and actually, I look back on that. I think that was such a formative time for me because I've always stood up for the underdog. I've always, like, bullying has was never anything that I tolerated. In fact, in high school, all of high school, I think I got in 2 fights. Both of them were with somebody who was bullying somebody else.
Oh
I
my.
stepped in to stop it, and so I was always a nice kid. I never was a troubled kid or a bad kid. I always had it in the back of my mind. I didn't want to disappoint my parents, but I was a good kid. I was a popular kid. I didn't play sports. My sophomore year, I played track. I threw shot put and discus, and then my junior year, I went out for high school football, and that's really when I found my first love, which
Yeah.
was playing that game, and then became pretty successful at it. Yeah, I was a good kid, just bullied, and I think because I was bullied, though, it actually helped me be a good kid because I realized there were other people that were being bullied and suffering, and I always wanted to help them.
And so when you think of dealing with a teenager that's come from dysfunction, abuse, abandonment, and all that, you're really challenged to change the course of their life. You and your wife did a lot of fostering. How many kids did you foster?
We had over 100 over 11-year period, all of them teenagers on probation, and not
Mm.
just probation, but we would actually go in and take them out of juvenile hall and bring them home with us. And many of those kids, if we didn't take them out of juvenile hall and bring them home,
Yeah.
they were getting ready to go to California Youth Authority. So
Which
they
is
were,
the worst.
Exactly, which is kind of the cream of the crop. But we fell into that by accident. We were youth pastors, and we had a girl in our youth group who had been in and out of I want to say four foster homes in a year. And
Wow.
the
Wow.
story he told us and stuff was just like, this is horrible. So we got our license and brought her home, and she was our first one. And then from that point on, we started getting kids just directly out of juvenile hall. And we would have six teenagers living in our house, and we had a nanny. Most of the time, we would have like four boys and two girls, or one time we had all six girls.
Uh,
We had my wife, and we had a female nanny. And so, I'm living with eight female. So
my.
I would get off work and go drive around for an hour or two. Just I didn't want to go home.
Decompress.
But it was
Oh,
honestly, it was some of the best times we ever had. But the stories and the things I heard from those kids were shocking. I mean, unbelievable abuse. And one kid, I wrote about some of those, in my book that you alluded to, which by the way is available on Amazon.
oh.
Right there, available on Amazon. You can go and purchase it. But a lot of the stories in that book are foster care related.
Hmm.
Uh, and there's a lot of stories I didn't share. One of the stories that I didn't share was one of the kids that we had in our house. His earliest memory was selling drugs or delivering drugs for his mom down the street when he was two or three. She would
No.
out of the house with the bag of drugs to go give to whoever.
Oh my.
And then his mom ended up selling him, trafficking him for drugs.
Mm.
And when you hear stories like that and you realize I'm at the point now where I don't judge anybody. Like I
Mm.
look at somebody that's homeless or somebody that's out there or somebody that's using drugs, and I think, you know what, if I lived the life they lived, I would probably be doing the
Yeah.
exact same thing. I'm not better than anybody. None of us are.
Yeah.
Like I said, I hit the lottery. I I was lucky that I grew up the way I did. But even growing up, hitting the lottery, I have my issues because of my childhood. Could you imagine
Mm.
being being abused and being trafficked and being all this
Ah.
these kids were
By
like
their parents.
by their parents, by the people
Yeah.
that used to love them.
Yeah.
And so, that just is I, I really can't wrap my head around it. I am a pastor. I look at people that come in and I realize there's a whole history here. There's a whole past here.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned your first wife, Martha, who I just loved the heart of compassion that she had and the willingness to jump in and help someone,
Yeah.
take risk. But you had quite a ordeal or challenge with her illness, and maybe talk about that a little bit. I'm sure there's listeners that are dealing with saying goodbye to a loved one because of illness or whatever.
Yeah. Well, so Martha was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So when we first got married, when we were engaged and going through the wedding stuff, she started noticing a few, just things we thought it was just stress, no big deal. And so, we got married and things were good and her health was okay. And then we started doing these camps, summer camps in Yosemite. In fact, I know
Yeah.
you're there. That was your idea, actually. We got that from you because you used to do that all the
Hmm.
time. And so we
Wait,
started,
wait. Little did we know that as you look at all the magnificent trees and mountains and hiking and all, we had to drive 10 hours to
yeah.
experience that. And you looked at me one night in Yosemite and you said, yeah, it's nice, but this looks like my backyard.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you said to me, "Have you ever seen a tree this big?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Barry, I've got trees this big in my backyard." And I remember
Uh,
you telling me you thought I was just full of,
yeah.
you know what? until you came and visited, and you're like, oh my God, you really do have
Oh my.
living in Eureka, where the giant sequoias meet the Pacific Ocean is a pretty darn doggone good place to live. So
Yeah.
I'm surrounded with beauty, but we're at Yosemite and we're doing this, and the heat is just really affecting her.
Mm,
Well, we find out later that people with multiple sclerosis don't do well with heat. And so that was an early sign. But, we know something's wrong. We're trying to figure it out. We're going to doctors, we're going to neurologists. And I tell you that one of the most incredible things that I ever witnessed was the day we went and we saw the neurologist, and he had told Martha, I was in the room with her. He told us, he said, okay, well, you either have an inoperable brain tumor, which you will
mm,
die from. You have lupus, which is a horrible disease and will probably kill you. Or you have multiple sclerosis, which is a horrible disease and will probably kill you. Come back next week, we'll have the test results and we'll let you know what it is. And so, you can imagine, I mean, she just got a death sentence.
yeah.
And so we go home and we're standing in the kitchen, and had been doing foster care, but none of the kids were home at the time. It was during the middle of the day. They were all in school. So we're standing in our kitchen and we're just sobbing, just sobbing. And Martha looked at me and she said to me, she said, the only real tragedy that can come from this is if we do not allow this to conform us into the image of Christ. And that's how she lived her life. That's how we lived our life. And so, I saw a incredibly healthy, athletic woman. She was a head cheerleader in high school, deteriorate to the point over, it was about 9 years of, not doing good, doing good. I mean, we were going after her healing, and she had moments where she was all of a sudden she'd do great.
Hmm.
But over time, she deteriorated to the point where she ended up completely bedbound. To see somebody go through that, she had a morphine pump installed in her because the pain, multiple sclerosis is
Hmm.
nerve pain, and it's really the most incredible pain, most horrendous pain that you can think of. And there were plenty of nights where she would wake up in the middle of the night screaming,
Ah.
in agony. We're pastoring a church at the time in Arcata, and I keep saying I because I was a single dad for a long time, but we had at the time, 2-year-old and a 7-year-old. And so, and I was predominantly the parent. I mean, Martha was like I said, completely bedbound. I'm also pastoring a church, and at that time is when Bethel Church in Reading, with Bill Johnson and Chris Vallotton, stepped in, called us, and they actually moved our family from Arcata, from Eureka to Reading, which is about 3 hours away. Here's what this church did for us. They paid me a salary for which my job description was take care of your family.
Ah.
They put our kids in their private school, even though my daughter, who was 2, wasn't old enough. They created a way for her to get in there and be in there. I mean, they literally, I think they hired somebody just to take care of her. They paid for me to see a therapist. They had a team show up on Monday with all of our meals pre-made. They had a team show up on Thursday that cleaned our house and mowed my lawn.
Oh
They
my.
Ministry students would show up and be in the room and pray with Martha all day long. They took care of us and my family like I've never heard any church ever doing for anybody. And they
Man.
did this for a full year and a half until she passed away. And then after she passed away, it was another 6 months. They kept doing it until I was able to get established and get on my feet somewhere.
Oh
And
my.
so it was an amazing time and an amazing gift in the most horrible circumstances you can. When Martha went from being, like I said, healthy to she couldn't feed herself, she couldn't do anything for the last year and a half. Literally just lay in bed,
Ah.
could barely talk. And there were 3 or 4 times where she went in the hospital and they said, "That's it. She won't come out. She'll die tonight." she just kept fighting. But the most amazing thing was, to see her continue to minister to people when they would come to minister to her. And there's so much, you come out of those situations with more questions than you have answers for. I have to say, you know what? There's mysteries about God that I don't
Hmm.
know, I don't understand, and I'm gonna choose to honestly set those aside, because if I go
Yeah.
down that road, it's not going to be healthy for me or my family. So she was sick for a long time. She finally passed away. I'm a single dad of 3-year-old and 8-year-old, and what do I do?
Mm.
What do I do? I mean, I was scared out of my mind. I didn't know what to do, but fortunately, because of Bethel and Chris and Bill, I was given 6 months to figure it out. And then Chris asked me to move back over to the coast here in Eureka and start a discipleship school for Bethel Reading, which we did, and I ran that for 15 years, and we discipled hundreds and hundreds of students.
Yeah.
And so, 11 years ago, I remarried, and my wife and I just celebrated our 11th year anniversary. She's an amazing lady. We've got an amazing marriage. So, I tell people I've had the advantage of being married to two amazing, beautiful, incredibly hot women. Life is wonderful and amazing and horrible and hard, and sometimes both of those things all at the same time.
We'll be right back.
The story behind the podcast for me is it actually started out as therapy for me. 2020 in May, and I had a major stroke. Took my whole right side. I lost my speech. I was slurred. I lived through it. I was in the hospital over a month, in therapy for a year and a half, where I wanted to disconnect with people. In the hospital, I said, man, I'm going to be frustrated thinking, how can I get back to where I was? That doesn't exist. So the Lord popped in my brain, no, this is your new norm. And it was all about focusing in on where I'm at and where I'm going instead of where I was. So I just dropped that name on the podcast because it's all about me kind of retooling and learning how to connect and speak again. So it's really helped me. Hey, thanks for listening to this podcast. Hey, did you know that you can choose between audio and video formats? Well, you can. Check out the video episodes on Spotify and YouTube. And audio, well, you'll find those on all of your major platforms as well. And now, back to the episode. Follow, listen, and share with those you know. The Lord has taken you through some deep woods, and He's allowed you to surface with helping others, coming alongside others, and that's exactly what a father does.
Yeah.
I'd like us to talk a little bit, Willy, about cultivating fatherhood. You've written a book about not only your own dad, your own experiences, but things you've learned along the way. Maybe start with, how do you define fatherhood?
Fatherhood is anybody that will invest their lives into somebody younger is really taking on that role. It's what Christianity is supposed to be. We're supposed to invest our lives in other people. Here's what I know about fathering. This is what I saw from my own father, is that, you know, my father was the only man who ever wanted me to surpass him. Why? Like, he wanted me to do greater things than he ever did. He wanted me to be better than he was. I mean, who else does that but a father?
Yeah.
And so when you start doing that with people around you and in your environment, and you really mean it, I want you to go farther. I want you to do this. I want to help you do this. And then, you learn how to do that's fathering. That's being somebody that people, are going to gravitate to because people, I mean, we live in a world that's cutthroat. We live in a world where everybody wants to get you down. Everybody wants to be better than you are. And when somebody comes along and it's like, oh no, actually, I really see greatness in you. Like I want to see you be way better than I am. I want to see you accomplish more than I do. It's got some great stories in it. The book cover has a picture of a skunk because
Explain
uh,
that, please.
yeah, we had one of our foster kids. So we had a house that had to go upstairs. It was an old barn. And
Mm.
so it'd been converted, but they didn't put an inside stairway. So to go upstairs, you had to go outside and upstairs to go up there, which really for our purposes was perfect because we could have two
Oh,
girls
yeah.
downstairs, we could have four boys and a nanny upstairs, and we didn't have to worry about the boys and girls mixing and stuff like that. So, this is way back in the day before cell phones existed. Maybe cell phones existed, but we didn't have any. We still had the old phone that was connected to the wall. So we had a line that was upstairs and we had a line for downstairs, so you could call
Mhm.
each other if you needed to. So about 1:30 in the morning, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning, we get a phone call and I answer it and it's Steven, one of our foster kids. And he says, Will, I think I have a skunk under my bed. And so I looked at Martha and I said, Steven thinks he has a skunk under his bed. I bet you it's a cat. There's no way it's a skunk. So I go upstairs and look under the bed, and sure enough, there's a skunk under the bed. We wake everybody up, we get the other boys up, we get our nanny up, we say, everybody go downstairs. We'll leave the back door open. The skunk lives in the woods. Obviously, it'll want to go home. So we go downstairs and we wait for like 2 hours, and there's no movement. So finally, I'm like, all right, I got to take things into my own hand. So I go out to the shed and I find a long pole. Actually, I think it was a piece of PVC pipe. So I go upstairs and I thought, I'm going to coax the skunk out from underneath the bed,
Oh, my.
run down the hall and outside. So before we do that, let's empty everything out. Let's make a path. Let's empty everything. So get all the boys up. We're emptying everything. The only thing we don't take out of the room is the bed where the skunk sat and a dresser that has a 32-inch TV on it. But these are the old school TVs with the big,
Right.
that weighs hundreds of pounds.
Oh, my.
We're like, just leave that. That'll be fine. So I start coaxing this skunk, just a little bit, just a little time. The skunk comes out from under the bed, takes off running right down the hall, gets right to the deck. I mean, I'm a skunk whisperer.
Oh,
I've nailed it. Like, I hope somebody's filming this because this is going to be amazing for me.
right.
Skunk gets right out the door. There's nobody outside. There's no reason for him to stop. He stops, he turns around, and I'm telling you, he looks me dead in the eyes and starts running straight at me, for which I freak out. I, I jump back, I hit the dresser, it hits the TV, comes crashing down. Boom. My wife with our foster girls are downstairs. They've all crawled in bed with her. They're right underneath that. My wife Martha, she looked at the girls and said, "Oh, this is not going well." So now the skunk goes back under the bed and crawls up into the box spring. So now it's like, okay, we've got to do something. So I tell Steven, I say, you get on one end of the box spring, I'll get on the other. We're going to pick it up, we're going to flip it, and we're going to run it down the side and throw it off the deck. Second floor. So we pick it up, we flip it, we start running, and it starts spraying.
Oh.
It sprays all the way down the hall. We throw it off the deck, and it just stays in the mattress. So now, honestly, now I'm pissed. I'm just at the end. So I also had gas in my shed. So it's still in there. I run, I get gas, I just throw gas everywhere, and I light a match, and the
Uh-uh.
whole thing just goes. Well, of course, the skunk just crawls out, looks at me and just moseys off into the woods. Skunk is fine. Now I've got a huge raging fire in the backyard.
Oh my.
So now I'm trying to spray this fire down, and it was horrible. So here's the thing: like I had told the boys 100 times, boys, we live in the woods. You have to close the back door. They would leave upstairs and leave the back door wide open. You have to close the back door. So as a good father, I'm
That's
like,
right.
okay, this is a wonderful teaching moment. I gather the boys up. Boys, there's a reason I tell you to do these things. You know, we live in the woods. You got to close the back door, all that stuff. So I'm feeling good about myself at this point in time. I've maintained, I'm okay. My cussing was at a very limit. I held on to everything. And so I'm like, all right, boys, go upstairs, get what you have to sleep. You'll sleep downstairs. We've got to renovate tomorrow. We got to figure this out. So they go upstairs. I go in, I take a shower and everything, and I get ready to crawl into bed. And the thought goes through my mind, is there any way they left that door open? And I looked at Martha and I said, do you think there's any way? And she's like, no. I'm like, I better check. So I go outside and guess what is wide open?
Uh,
At that point in time, Perry, I lose it. I
uh,
lost it. I am screaming and I'm yelling. It's 5 o'clock in the morning and I'm done. And I just lost it. But what a great memory. So
uh,
come to find out, our Stephen, another rule was don't take any food upstairs. Well, he was taking food and just shoving it under the bed. Well, when we went to clean up, it looked like that skunk had been living there for a while.
no.
It had been there for at least a week. And I said to Stephen, I said, you didn't hear anything? He goes, I thought it was moths. And I'm like, okay. That's the skunk story. And that's the story. That's why the skunk's on the cover. It's a hilarious story. I'm sure I didn't do it justice, but it
Oh,
was it was brutal. But
yeah.
those are the things that you learn with kids. One of my favorite stories in the book. I would take the boys. I decided to take the boys fishing, and our house is maybe 10 minutes from a dock. And on the way, there was a store that sold bait. It was about 9 o'clock at night. I knew they were open. I'm like, boys, I had a bunch of poles. Boys, let's go fishing. So we load up into the van. We get the poles. We stop. We get bait. We go to the dock. You have to park and then walk out to it. And we're walking out to it. And I noticed one of the kids was straggling way behind. So I can see the dock. I tell the boys, I say, hey, go ahead. I'll catch up with you in a second. Let me see what's going on with this other kid. So I hold up and he comes up and he's just bawling. He's just tears are just streaming down his face. And I said, you don't have to go fishing. Like, it's not a big deal. You could have stayed at home. You don't have to do this. He goes, no, you don't understand. Well, I'm going to try not to cry.
Mm.
He said to me, he said, my entire life, my dad told me he would take me fishing. He never once took me fishing. He said, I've been in your house a week and you're
Uh,
already fishing,
uh,
right?
uh,
And that's just a chapter of dads, do what you say you're going to do. Like life happens. Like we all have to change plans sometimes. But if
right.
every time you go to do something, you're changing plans, you're doing something wrong. Because that's hurting your kids. Like, your
Yeah.
kids have to know you're stable. That was the gift that my father gave me.
Hmm.
I had a game. I didn't wonder, is my dad going to be there? I knew he was going to be. I knew where he was going to be sitting because he'd sit at the same place every time. I knew he was right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's like the things that the failures that we have as fathers are really most of the time pretty simple. It's pretty simple stuff,
Yeah.
you know? And so those are stories that I get into in the book. Those are things that I've experienced, that I've lived, that I've seen, with our kids and yeah, it's just, and really when we started the discipleship school, it wasn't that different. A lot of what I did was just um, talking with kids and trying to work out some of the issues and the problems they've had from the past And the problem is the older they get, the harder it is to change.
Mm.
And unless you're really committed to that change, unless you're committed to going in and getting a therapist. I mean, at our church here, we have a full-time marriage and family therapist on staff, licensed with the state of California. Because in today's world, I think everybody needs therapy. I see a therapist. Right now, he's kind of on call, as I need him. But I've seen him for years. Like if I'm having issues, I think everybody should see somebody, because we've all had things that have happened to us in the past that affect our future, and
Right.
we have to deal with them.
Right.
So yeah.
Oh, man, it sounds like your book is really practical, which is needed today. And so, would you say that your book aims to come alongside um, someone that is in the position of fathering, if they're the father or not, that they would be encouraged and giving them some tools
A
to
hundred
be that
percent.
father? Good.
That's why I wrote it. So I wrote it to help fathers, whether you're a biological father or just somebody in that role, to help you in everyday life. I mean, and I'm really honest in it. I talk about failures. I talk about mistakes. I talk about things that, I did that I learned from.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, it definitely is a help. Anybody that wants to get that book, buy it for a father that buy it for, I think it's a great gift for, Father's Day,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Buy the book, give it to somebody. I really do think it would help. And that's, I've got a lot of comments like that. The book goes from fun to funny to, hey, here's some real life applications, to don't do this because this is what I did and this was a failure.
Wow. Well, I think for me, thinking back, the most important part of fathering is to always establish and maintain a relationship.
Yep,
If you don't have that relationship, you can't speak into someone's life.
that's right.
And to me, that was major. I found a quote that is simple, but it says this: "Any man can be a father, but it takes a real man to be a dad." And I kind of get this feeling from your book that I haven't read yet, that that's what we're talking about. When I hear the word dad, it's so different from father.
Yeah.
And when I hear the word pop or pops, that's even more intimate. And so, knowing you and your dad, I'm excited to read it. And I want to just suggest to my listeners to get the book, and we can both compare notes. Well, as we kind of tie things up a little bit, Willie, I always go back to who's listening to this episode. And I know by just reading my stats or hearing comments that people are dealing with real issues that aren't going away, and they're overwhelmed and need encouragement and hope. Could you just speak from your heart to that listener that feels hopeless as a parent and maybe hopeless as a foster parent, discouraged? Could you kind of share some hope with them?
Absolutely. So, first of all, I think the thing you just said is by far the most important part of parenting, period, and that's relationship. And, you've got to keep relationship open. And you may be dealing with something with your child or anybody, and you may be 100% right. But just because you're right doesn't mean that you have the right to lord that over somebody, right? Being right isn't worth destroying a relationship. be quiet. Keep it to yourself. There are times where I have dealt with my own kids where, they're getting ready to make a mistake. I can see it coming. I can see it clear, but I know that if I jump in the middle of it, it's going to hurt that relationship. I
Right.
just have to pull back. And so, well, what's my responsibility? I pray. I don't tell them, hey, I want you to know I'm praying for you in a situation because I see you're doing a wrong thing here, and I really want to tell you, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to pray. That's dumb, right? I pray. I keep it so they don't ever know I'm praying, but I pray, and as they go through it, and then when I'm asked, I'll help.
When you think about your dad, what do you miss and what do you wish you could have said to him?
Wow. Well, first of all, it's an honest statement if I say to you, I miss my dad every single day. There's never been a day where I haven't missed him. I think the thing that I miss most about my father is his wisdom. He had wisdom that really could only come from the Lord. The wisest man I've ever met. Great advice. But I also knew, and here's probably, I think I said this earlier, when I would ask my dad a question, I knew the advice that I was going to get was what he thought was always in my best interest. Never once did my dad give me advice based on what was best for him.
Wow.
And I think that's powerful. And honestly, that's a commitment I've tried to keep or tried to make here, with people in the church or somebody comes in and talks to me or wants something. I always have in mind what's best for them, not what's best for me. Because it's not about me. It's not
Right.
about, it's not about what I want or what I do. It's about others. And
Right.
my dad modeled that servanthood. My dad modeled generosity. You'll remember my Chrysler Newport convertible
Uh, the one that had a license plate that
that
said
said, "I am
I'm
Willie."
Willie. The red, that was so incredible. It was really cool red with
Yeah,
white interior,
black interior but a
black
white
interior.
top and big
Yes.
white tires, white walls.
Yes. It
Yeah.
was
So then,
stunning.
so then you remember my sister's 1966 Rambler,
Yeah,
blue.
it was your dad's, right?
It was my dad's, and he gave it to my sister. And so then I don't remember what was going on with her, but she got a different car, and so my dad had the Rambler, and he went to sell it.
I
And
remember.
uh, huh?
I remember this. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so he went to sell it, and I was home at the time. I think I had moved back home for some reason, but I was living there, and so he puts it up. A guy comes by to buy it, and my dad was asking $1,500 for it, which was a total fair price. It was a great car, low miles, everything. And the guy comes by and he's haggling with my dad, and he's everything's wrong with the car and all this stuff, and he offers my dad some ridiculously low offer, and my dad's like not interested. So then the guy comes all the way up to my dad's asking price. All right, I'll give you 1,500. My dad said, no, the car's not for sale anymore. And the guy was like,
Wow.
what? And so I asked my dad, I said, what's the deal? He goes, he's just trying to sell it and make a buck. He's not going to keep the car. He just wants to make money off it, which is fine. I don't have anybody making money, but just a disagreeable person. And the next day, a kid comes by, just a 18, 19-year-old kid. Oh my God, this car's amazing. And will you take payments? And so my dad's talking to him, and I'm watching this whole thing. And next thing I know, I see my dad and him shaking hands and going, it's a deal. And so I'm like, all right, well, Dad, how much did you get for the car? 500 bucks. I said, what?
Oh
He goes, yeah, he
my.
goes, 500 bucks, and I'm letting him make payments. And I'm like,
Oh
what?
my.
Yesterday you had full price, but today you sell it to kid. He goes, and this was my dad. This is
Yeah.
classic. This is my dad fathering. He said, well, the guy yesterday was just trying to make money. He said, this kid just needs a break.
Wow.
Kid just needs somebody in his life to step up and to give him an opportunity. It was
Wow.
never about the money with my dad.
Yeah.
It was about, being generous and being giving and being kind and being loving and investing in others. And so that's, again, me winning the lottery. That's what I got to see firsthand was my dad.
Yeah.
It wasn't what was best for him.
Oh,
It wasn't what was
wow.
best for, it was here's a kid that needs a break. I'm going to give him a break.
Yeah.
That's
It,
phenomenal.
I just want to say thank you for all the time I've known you. You've been transparent, you've been honest, and you've been one that comes alongside and walks with that person and with me. And I, I, I don't know if anyone else can write a book on the subject as you have lived that. And it was modeled to you, and you are modeling it. And I just want to thank you for sharing your story today.
Well, thank you, Barry. It's great connecting with you. You're a good man, and honestly, you're the reason why I'm in ministry. So when I first, started working with you and realizing, I mean, I'm, I met you. I was getting ready to be a senior in college for the summer, and I was home getting ready to play my senior year of football, slid into third base at a church softball team and blew my knee up, and ended up staying home that semester, that year, and working with you. And honestly, that was the greatest thing that ever happened to me
Mm,
because how I saw you do ministry, how I saw you enjoy ministry, how I saw you just love others
mm,
was something that I wanted to do. And
mm,
so you're the reason that I'm where I'm at. You're the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing. And I just thank you for
mm.
that. So I'll always be in your debt. I'm always somebody that you can call on, and I'll do anything I can for you anytime. So
Mm.
I love you a lot. Love you and Barb, and I wouldn't recognize your kids now if they weren't
I
me.
don't.
Yeah. But you guys took good care of Martha and I appreciate everything you did for us. I love you a lot. Please tell
Love you
Barb I said
too.
hi.
I will. Since you told a story, I just had one pop in my mind. You and Martha were in the guest room staying with us. There started to be this smell in the house, and I went, "What is it?" And it was close to where you guys were staying. And I looked to Barb and I said, "Do you smell something?" And she goes, "Yeah, I didn't want to say anything." Well, we went on another day or two, but it was getting worse and it was rotten smell. And it turned out to be a squirrel that got locked in our wall and started the decay process. And
Yes.
meanwhile, you're smelling it thinking, man, Barry and Barb's house stinks. And we're up in the room going, man, Martha and Willie, there's that odor. So it's not always what you think it is.
Very much so. That's a
It,
great
it's
lesson in life.
it's good to communicate, huh?
Very much so. Yes.
Well, you helped me get it out. I think we popped a hole in the
I
wall or
remember that. Yep.
yeah, that
Yep.
was
Found it. And then we were
nasty.
both relieved that neither one of us
Yeah,
were a sneaky couple.
yeah. I never took so many showers in my life, every 20 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Hey, Willie, if my listeners want to find out a little bit more about you and the book, do you have a website you could share?
Yeah, absolutely. It's willybowles.com. Yeah, head on over there, and there's actually links to our YouTube channel. Everything I teach is on YouTube, and there's all kind of stuff on the website. So head over there, and hopefully you enjoy it.
Well, Willie, I want to thank you once again for not only sharing your story, but just sharing uh, who you are and being who you are. Love you, man. let's connect again. And I hope to see you someday soon as well.
I would love that, and love you a lot, Barry. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for this. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
A
Thanks,
lot of
man.
fun. All
All
right.
righty. Bye bye.